All right.
Nothing showed up ringing.
Was it? It sounded like it was.
I know, but
All right. Welcome everyone to Dragon Tail Books. We have our continuation of our environmental series, and so today we have Megen Hines from the City of Menomonie to talk about all the great sustainable things the city's doing. So welcome, Megen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne, for inviting me and for everyone to come on this beautiful day.
Yeah.
I promise I'll try to be as exciting as the weather outside. So as Anne said, I'm the Environmental Program Coordinator for the City of Menomonie. It's a position the city has had for the last 5.5 years, and that's how long I've been here. So I was a new position when I was hired for the city. So excited to talk about all the different things that we do in the kind of environmental sustainability world. So kind of agenda for the day, we're going to talk about water quality and stormwater things that we do, waste management, urban forestry, energy efficiency, some actions that you can take to help us and to help the environment, some upcoming events. There's a number of upcoming events that are really exciting, and then we'll have time for some question and answers. So I'll do my best to not use 110 acronyms, but I will promise to try to at least tell you what they are on that. But I live in a world of acronyms. It's a whole language. So talking about water quality, so the city has an MS4 permit, which is a municipal separate sewer system permit. It's a tongue twister. We were first permitted in 2006, and it's a permit that's from the DNR. It's a really comprehensive permit that is very prescriptive on what we have to do and what we have to measure, track, all the things. There are 6 minimum control measures in that permit for things that we have to do. So those are education and outreach, public involvement and participation, illicit discharge detection and elimination, construction site pollutant control, post-construction stormwater management, and pollution prevention. And then in addition to those measures, we also have the Lakes Tanner and Menomonie TMDL, which is a extra set of regulations and compliance items that we have to work on to help clean up the lake and reduce phosphorus content in the watershed. As part of that, we also have to submit an annual report each March to detail all of our program activities and to maintain compliance with our permit. So this is kind of a busy slide. It's a kind of the last 25-ish years of what the city has done for stormwater. For different management plans, we've crafted several ordinances for a variety of different things that we'll talk about a little bit later. Talked about our stormwater utility, which was created in 2008. That's our primary funding mechanism for water quality, stormwater activities in the city. So if you live in the city, on your quarterly utility bills, you will see a line for stormwater. That's what those dollars help fund, is this program. So residents pay based on, they just pay a flat rate, which right now is $12.50 per quarter per household. Businesses and industrial uses, schools, etc., they pay a rate that's based on the amount of impervious area. So the area of hard surfaces, so their building footprint, their parking lots, etc. They pay a rate based on the amount of impervious surface that they have. So I'm going to whip through some of these minimum control measures and the things that we do we do to fulfill those measures and the things that we track. So education is a big one. There's a number of different topics that we have to educate on. So doing things like this tonight, do a lot with the school district and different kids and field days kind of things. But one of the things we also do is we collaborate with other municipalities who have the same permit. So Range Rivers is a group of MS4 permitted communities in western Wisconsin that are all working together to do education and outreach for stormwater. So we pay in dues as a member municipality, and then we meet monthly, and then we do kind of larger education projects. Like we have signage at different ball fields, we've done radio ads, we've done TV ads, things like that, things that each individual municipality would have a hard time funding or having the resources to do. We also put on workshops and are at community events and things like that. We also have a mini grant program. So if you work for a government or a nonprofit, we do $1,000 mini grants to do rain gardens or different kind of stormwater water quality projects. So that's something that we like to fund, and we love to see the different projects that groups come up with. And then it's also just a great peer network, idea sharing. Hey, I got this problem. Hey, how do you handle this? Just trying to not reinvent the wheel. One of the cool projects we're doing right now is a chloride test study. So this is testing salt levels in our area waters. So 1 teaspoon of salt can permanently pollute 5 gallons of water. So one of the things we want to do is kind of get some baseline testing data. So like this time of year, there should be kind of entering what I would say their baseline rates are. And then as we go through winter, whether the city is applying salt, the county, homeowners on your sidewalk, etc., that runs off into our waters when snow melts, and then it causes these big spikes. In southern Wisconsin, they're starting to see water bodies that are becoming critically impaired with chloride levels, and we can't at this point cost effectively reverse that. Including some drinking water sources that are starting to actually physically taste salty. So that's one of the things that we want to do is just kind of get this baseline data and then be able to do education around it to hopefully not get to those kind of chronically acute levels of salt in our water bodies. We're also an active member of the Red Cedar Water Quality Partnership. This is another stakeholder group kind of across the Red Cedar watershed. So most of Dunn County, most of Barron County, and chunks of about like 6 other counties. We kind of came together just over a decade ago as part of the TMDL to write what's called a 9 key element plan, or basically a watershed plan of how are we going to get into compliance, what is the data that we have, how are we going to start to tackle this problem for the next 10 years. We are currently writing the 2nd iteration of that plan right now that will be submitted to the EPA at the end of the year. But we meet every other month, and it's really a great time to network with other folks and learn more about what the different entities are doing, especially if there's multiple levels of government and private entities, lake districts, all that. So it's really great to learn more about what's being done above us, since Menomonie is kind of at the bottom of the watershed. We're almost the end user of all of that. So hearing what everyone else is doing to help support that is great. So public involvement and participation. This is a minimum control measure that makes sure that we are telling the public about all the things that we do, and particularly our elected officials. So we twice a year do presentations at our city council to talk about stormwater, mostly at budget time, and submitting our annual report. So we will go through that. We have plans in our reports that are all available on our website, or you can come to City Hall if you really love reading large plans about stormwater. We can hook you up with that. And then we have to do an annual volunteer event. So we've partnered with different entities like the Baseball Association, with UW Stout students to do kind of park cleanups or trash cleanups along our lakes and rivers. So illicit discharge detection and elimination, or IDDE for short. This is basically the nothing but rain down the drain ordinance. Making sure that nothing is going down into our storm sewers and discharging into waters of the state that we don't want. So this particular picture here was from a compliance report that someone was walking, saw there was oil in the road that appeared to be dumped down the storm drain. So I then go out and look at that, and sure enough, there was a pretty oily sheen on top of the frozen leaves. Wasn't able to actually figure out who did this, but at least was able to get some pictures and trying to do some education about that. So all of the storm drains, for the most part, are going to go to a water body. There are several that are going to go into a stormwater pond first, but for the most part, it's the best to just assume that anything that goes down this drain is going to end up in the lake or any of our rivers or streams. If you see something, say something. I'd rather go out and look at something and be like, yeah, no, that's actually not a big deal, than to miss it and have missed the opportunity to potentially clean it up or at least lessen the impact from that. So these are the outfalls. This is the opposite end of that storm drain. So this is the pipe. Outfalls are the end of the system. They're the pipe that comes out that shoots into the lake, to the rivers, the streams, creeks, etc. On the right is a map of all the outfalls that we have in the city of Menomonie. We currently have 148 outfalls. Our street department staff inspects each one of these annually. So they go there at least 48 hours after a precipitation event, because we want to make sure that it's dry, that nothing should be running. And then we take pictures, In addition to kind of the IDDE screening, we're looking for maintenance concerns as well. If there's erosion, if the pipe is starting to erode, if the pipe has fallen off. We have some that like the end of the pipe has fallen down or things like that. So looking at maintenance concerns, and we do that every year just to make sure everything is going okay. And I just said pretty much all of those things for that. So then, yeah, this is kind of a time-consuming thing to go to 148 places, and they are not necessarily in the most accessible things. It's down lots of hills and steep banks and things like that. And it almost always is a very late fall after it's too cold to do like road work. So it sometimes is a little bit dicey for our street staff. But it's really, I think, highlighting that it's water quality stuff is not just me in the city. It's our street department. It's our building inspection department. It's our city engineers. It's a real collaborative effort to get all this work done. And we're really willing to help each other out to get that stuff done. So construction site pollutant control, this is another thing that other people help me do. So the building inspector is the one who handles this part of the program. So we have an ordinance that we did in 2004. It's basically focuses on construction sites and the measures that they have to take to make sure that soil is staying on their site, as much water is staying on their site in that process. They have to give us plans of how they're going to do that, and then we can enforce those plans, etc. So these are a couple of examples. This is an active construction site. These are pictures from this winter. This is the entrance to their construction site. On the left here, you can see it is full of dirt that is then tracking onto the road. That is not what we want. What we do want, so we gave them a warning and a violation. And so on the right, then they put in tracking rocks. So it's just basically big rocks that as the trucks are driving on it, all that mud and dirt is flopping off into those rocks instead of flopping off into our streets. This is coming out of that same site. You can see there's a significant amount of mud coming there in the curb line. So if it rained, which winter has been weird, and we've had a lot of rain in the winter, that would all be washing down our storm drains and then filling sediment into the lakes, which is not a great plan. On the right is a residential construction site, and you can see there's silt fence, which is that kind of black fence there, was not installed properly or far enough down. So the pile of dirt there from the construction is eroding off and running off into our curb line there. So another one that our building inspector gives them typically 24 hours to get their act together on this. So they don't get much time to get back into compliance. Post-construction stormwater management, this is our stormwater ponds and swales and things of that nature. So this is when construction is going to happen in the city. Developers have to give us a plan that tells us a lot of different things. It tells us about how does the water flow on the site before they do anything? How does the water going to flow on the site after they propose their buildings and their constructions? How are they going to reduce stormwater runoff, both sediment and phosphorus, to meet our city ordinances and state statutes? And then what's the design of the practice? Is it going to be a dry pond or a wet pond or a swale? They have to sign a maintenance and monitoring agreement, which is basically saying in perpetuity they have to maintain the function of these stormwater ponds for every owner till the end of time. So that's recorded with the Register of Deeds. And then some of the common stormwater practices that we see are wet ponds. So that's a pond that is going to hold water all the time. It focuses on getting settlement and things to settle out. Infiltrations are a dry pond, so there's no water in them unless it has rained, and then it's letting that water slowly infiltrate into the soil. Rain gardens and bioinfiltration basins are the ones that have flowers inside of them, and then vegetated swales are just kind of the dips in the grass that are typically still mowed with turf grass. They're just kind of providing the conduit to get water to a certain place. So on the left here is an example of a pond that was put in up by the Estover Terrace development. This is one that the city actually took ownership of in that development. On the right is a map of all of the stormwater ponds in the City of Menomonie. The blue ones are ones that the city owns, which are, we own 36 ponds right now. And then in the pink is privately owned ponds, and that's currently at 80 ponds for that. So a lot of infrastructure in the city, and that's not counting any like swales and culverts and things like that. So there's a lot of infrastructure out there. If you look around town, you'll notice a lot of that. So pond inspections for our 36 publicly owned ponds, those have to be inspected annually. So I go out and do those in conjunction with our streets foreman, because the streets department is the one who would be doing any maintenance on it. So we do that together. And then privately owned ponds, I inspect at least once every 5 years. My goal is to do every 3, but for sure once in our permit term. I do privately owned ponds, and then if there's maintenance that needs to be there, I'm working with that property owner to get that work done. Things that we're looking at there, we're looking at the condition of the structures, so the inlet pipe, the outlet pipe, access to the pond, can you get to the pond, if you needed to do maintenance. If there's any erosion, if there's any woody vegetation, so you don't really want like trees or shrubs or things of that nature like on the slopes of the pond. So those need to get taken out. If there's trash that's there, if there's sediment there that's kind of starting to prevent water from flowing in, they would have to kind of dredge that out, etc. So those are the things that we look at during pond inspections. This is another example of a regional stormwater pond. This is on 17th Street over by the fairgrounds. So this is a 2-cell pond, so it has a wet pond here, then it overflows into a dry pond over here. So it's kind of a 2-cell pond that's actually fairly typical design to have both structures there for that. This one is the Wakanda Regional Pond, which is up in Wakanda Park on the beach road. We cut a pipe that was already existing in North Menomonie, and then it goes into a wet pond, and then through here, there's a series of cells that kind of step their way all the way down to the lake. It has lots of native plants in it, so this is kind of an example of that bioinfiltration basin. And those weirs then in the rock kind of allow it to kind of flow over and go in through there. So pollution prevention is kind of the catch-all minimum control measure. So things that fall under there are street sweeping. So we have a couple of street sweepers. One is mechanical, so it really is just like it sounds, it's like a broom in your kitchen, but a lot fancier for that. And then there's a vacuum one that has like some suction that helps get some of that sand up. Different scenarios work better for different sweepers there. We typically street sweep between March and November. We do a big push as soon as the snow is kind of done. As of this week, we have at least hit every city street once this spring. So we'll continue doing street sweeping, kind of trying to head back and hit harder hit areas. And we will eventually street sweep all of the trap rock that is out on Broadway. They're starting to spray patch and things like that. So we use it for that as well, not just for the sediment and dirt and sand and all of that. We collect and pile all of these street sweepings, and then we test them after a certain volume. So that's because we have a permit for beneficial reuse, which is also from the DNR. It's called a low hazard exemption, meaning that instead of having to landfill all of this material, we test every, I think it's 200 yards. I'm not 100% certain. And then based on those tests, we screen it. So any of the like pop bottles or litter or things like that gets out. That has to go to the landfill. But then we can use that material for fill in certain spots based on our test results. So that's a huge money saver, being able to have that permit. It's a 5-year permit. We just sent in to have that re-upped for another 5 years. So we should hopefully know soon if that happens. Then we do leaf collection, which we are currently in the process of doing in the spring and the fall. We do a couple of days each season where we'll pick yard waste and brush up at the curb. Leaves are a significant source of phosphorus pollution, especially in the fall. We compost the yard waste that we get at the solid waste site. And then once that finished compost is ready, we give it away for free. So there's a very large pile at the solid waste site. So if you're in need of compost for your garden, feel free to come and grab that. And then we follow this up by street sweeping just to kind of make sure we're catching as much of those leaves in that process. In the last couple of years, we've done some native plants at City Hall. I begged for areas and got one little stretch on the south side and the area by the dumpster enclosure and the electrical things that was not really being mowed well anyways. So I was like, hey, I'll take that. Beggars can't be choosers. So it's the prettiest dumpster enclosure area you've ever seen. So being able to do that, having kind of pocket prairies and things like that, it's been a great conversation starter. This is a butterfly that our communication specialist saw like every day for like days. She'd come in every day and was like, oh, your butterfly's there. So we almost named it and like, you know, had a very strong connection to this particular butterfly. So that kind of is what the MS4 permit is, and then our little extra one is the total maximum daily load, or the TMDL, which is basically a pollution diet for a water body, or how I like to explain it, it is a pie. So it's the amount of a pollutant that a water body can handle and still meet water quality standards. So I like to think of it as a big pie, so that's the amount that the water body can have, and then they slice up the pie for all the different users and land uses for that. So for the city, because we are a point source, aka we can point to the pipes, we can do that. We get regulated with a very specific number. Other sources, like non-point sources of like from agricultural runoff or things like that you can't necessarily just like point to, those don't necessarily have the same purpose. They have water quality goals and measures, but they don't have like a certain number for a specific person or a specific business because of the lack of a point. So the city did some water quality modeling back in 2023, which is basically a fancy computer program that puts in a variety of things, including kind of land use, land cover, how water flows in these kind of sub-basins of the city. And the goals for the city is for phosphorus reduction that we have a 39.2% reduction compared to doing absolutely nothing is kind of the standard. And then we have to have a 20% reduction in total suspended solids, or like the sediment reduction from the no controls. So in this modeling, we came out with that we were at 50.5% reduction for sediment or TSS. And then we were at 45.5% reduction for phosphorus, which we show that we are in compliance with our permit. We are working with the DNR to get formal concurrence with this. The thing to note here is this model, we did not include any of our privately owned stormwater ponds. So all of those 80 stormwater ponds that you saw on the map earlier, those aren't included in this model. Street sweeping isn't included in this model. Leaf pickup isn't included in this model. It's a very bare bones model. And we're still meeting our goals for that fairly handily. So we're waiting now to get concurrence to the DNR and then hoping to be able to move on, because the TMDL is not the entire city. It is only the parts of the city that drain into Lake Menomonie. So if you are in parts of the city that would drain into Wilson Creek or below the dam, like the Red Cedar River, those are not considered in the TMDL. So if I want to do like a stormwater practice outside of that, I really want to make sure that we are compliant with the TMDL, that the DNR agrees with that, before we spend money doing additional ponds other places. Kind of the next two ponds that are on the list for when that happens are down at our community services area off of Highway 29, and then up in North Menomonie off of like 28th Avenue as you're heading out north on 25 out of town. Over the railroad tracks on the right-hand side, there's kind of an area there that we own part of it, and we need to buy some land there too, but another pond would be our next one, but neither of those drain into the lake. So both into the Red Cedar River. Well, the north one into Wilson Creek, the one by the community services into the Red Cedar River. So now kind of switching gears away from water and stormwater to waste management. The city has a drop-off site for solid waste and recycling. It's open 3 days a week for city residents, and we take a lot of things at the site. We have what I would consider your regular household trash and recycling, so paper, cardboard, glass, aluminum cans, steel cans, all of that. We also take scrap metal, so basically anything metal we can take. Used oil and oil filters, furniture and bulky items, there is a charge for that. Carpeting, which also has a charge. Limited amounts of construction waste, like a pickup load or less. No shingles. And then we also take yard waste and brush. We have that free compost and wood chips as well out there. We also have curbside recycling. The city pays for curbside recycling for 1 to 4 unit residences. So that's one of the other things you'll see on your quarterly utility bill if you live in the city. That is on there. We have 2 current haulers for curbside recycling, GFL, which is the old Menomonie disposal, WM, which is the old advanced disposal. They like to buy each other. And then we also have a new one coming to town, which is really exciting. Martha Sanitation out of Baldwin is expanding their operations into the city in May. So that's another option for both residential and commercial solid waste recycling in the city. Urban forestry has been a big focus of the last several years, mostly because of the emerald ash borer and the large amount of ash trees that we had in our city boulevards and our parks, and just in general in private property as well. It was a very popular tree to plant, particularly after the Dutch elm disease epidemic. They're like, oh, ash is a really great tree that's kind of like an elm, and we planted a lot of them, which didn't work out so well for us. So we removed in the last probably 5 years over 1,000 ash trees just out of city boulevards and like the main areas of parks. The kind of more wild, natural, wooded areas, we have not done any maintenance in there. We're kind of letting nature do its thing there. But for urban forestry, we do have a city forester position. That's a position within our city streets department. Probably spends about half of his time on forestry related duties and half on kind of streets maintenance, plowing snow, that kind of thing. That may change a little bit as we move away from cutting trees all winter long. And then we have an urban forestry board, which Liz is the chair of, and Monica is on it as well. So we have that. We meet 11 times a year and work on different policies, procedures, different events, things like that. The city maintains a tree inventory, which is on the right. This is a little snip from North Menomonie neighborhood. So we use this to help identify tree species, and then mostly for operations and maintenance. So all the green dots are trees that are good, that need no help from us. Yellow trees are trees that are in need of pruning. Red trees are ones that are in need to being taken down. The blue dots are future planting sites, and then the pink dots are stumps to remove that, if it's a suitable planting site, will turn to a blue dot once it's ground up. So most of our forestry work as far as removals happens over the winter months, so kind of November to March-ish, kind of depending on weather. So our street department has crews that do that when they're not plowing snow. So kind of the amount of trees they cut down is inversely proportional to the amount of snow we get. So this year they cut down 246 trees. It was a little bit snowier year. And we are to essentially the end of boulevard ash trees. We have 3 trees left, mostly because of parking issues, trying to get them down when people have vehicles parked too close and they couldn't get them down. There are still some in our parks areas and all of that, but we are very much nearing the end of that.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
How many have all 1,000, are they going to be replaced, or?
So we are working on replacements. We have done a couple of urban forestry grants from the DNR that has helped boost the number of trees that we've planted. And we've also have an allocation of just over $15,000 out of the city's ARPA allotment to go towards trees. And then the last couple of years, we've had a pretty significant boost in our operational budget from the city to plant more trees. So we're getting close to getting back for that. So like this year, we are going to be planting 148 trees, I think, just under 150. We've got half our order in, so we kind of do spring planting like May timeframe, and then usually a fall planting that's like September, October. Try to avoid the like super hot summer months. So we're getting closer to that. One of the things our city forester, we were just talking about it, was a lot of the trees that we took down were under power lines and are really dangerous to cut down. So we're not going to replant trees under power lines. So we probably won't end up with a 1-to-1 conversion on that, because we're trying to keep like to suitable planting spots, safe planting spots. Because even some of the trees that are shorter and are meant for under power lines often end up right there, or you're very close to it and you still are closer than you really want to be in a bucket and a chainsaw, and you've got a lot of things you're looking at. So yeah, we'll probably won't do a 1-for-1 replanting, but working on that right now. So here are some of the trees we're planting. These were trees that we planted last spring. We started working with a different vendor. You can kind of see them here. They're grown on a board, and then they have kind of a plastic wrap around them. And then the roots grow out instead of down. And then they're air pruned, all the roots on the outside. And then you remove that plastic wrap and you have what they call a cake. And you put that in there. So this is a pretty large tree. They're like 2 to 3 inch caliper trees. And then within a couple of weeks, they very much root in. So they have been a great vendor so far. The best thing about this program is they have a 5-year warranty on them. So if they die for whatever reason, shock, vandalism, run over by a car, etc., they are replaced within those 5 years. So we've been doing that. So they're a little bit more expensive, but they're a little bit larger trees, so it has a little bit more impact visually and like canopy wise to try to get us started for that. And then we're also trying to plant a variety of species. So we're not planting all of like one species, trying to not get into the same boat again. Although if there's like a maple blight of 2040, we're going to be in kind of trouble for that. We have a lot of maples, and particularly a lot of like Norway maples and like not wildly desirable maples. So for a long time, we did not plant any maples. We have started to plant some, just knowing like age diversity is also a thing. And a lot of the maples that are out there are pretty cracked, and we have a fair number of them on our removal list for like when we're done with the ash trees. So we are planting some maples back now too, just to make sure we have a good diversity. But prioritizing native plants when we can. There are not a ton of native trees that do super well in a boulevard. A boulevard's a pretty rough spot for a plant or a tree. But we do our best on that, or try to do like cultivars of native plants that are made to withstand road salt, pollution, all of that. So we've done a couple of restoration projects in the city. This is the Galloway Creek Restoration Project on a parcel of land that the city owns over by the high school. It's a couple acre parcel partnered with the lower Chippewa invasive partnerships. Work to remove tons of invasive buckthorn, a couple of cork trees, and some honeysuckle. That's some of the work here. And then through some of their funding through the Maine Gale Foundation, we planted a whole bunch of trees back in that property. And now it's kind of just a natural area. It's not an official city park, but it's an area that folks can go down and be near the water and walk down and enjoy nature in the middle of the city. And then a current project that we have with our Urban Forestry Board is kind of a test project in Phelan Park. So at the very south end of the park, there is a tributary of Galloway Creek that is kind of the headwaters of Galloway Creek there. Very invested with buckthorn and honeysuckle. And with Dr. Keith Gilland and his UW Stout students who just took some chainsaw safety classes, got to practice their skills and removed a ton of invasives over the winter, which looks really awesome. And then the fire department was kind enough to burn it for us. And then I just picked up 300 trees today that we are going, saplings that we are going to plant there with different volunteers and groups to try to restore that back to more native trees there. So we have a couple of different native trees and shrubs that will go in there and will help. They'll just be little guys, so we'll help fence them in and all of that, but hoping to kind of repopulate that area. And then if it goes well, we're hoping to kind of replicate this and work our way through the park area there. So the city has also done a lot in the energy world. So in 2020, the city council passed a resolution for the municipal operations and buildings to be carbon-free electricity by 2050. It also established some incremental goals for our carbon reduction, that we would reduce 25% of our carbon footprint by 2030, and then 60% by 2040, and then be fully carbon neutral by 2050. So with that resolution and that goal, we knew we needed some help in how do we get there, developing a plan, etc. So we partnered with Xcel Energy and their Partners in Energy program. So we were actually the first municipality in Wisconsin to do this program. So it was a 2-year program where we formed an energy action team, which was city staff, business leaders, residents, representatives from the school district and Stout, met together. We talked about our goals for Menomonie, our priorities for energy, et cetera, and that developed an energy action plan. And then that outlined both kind of near and mid and long-term things to do to kind of enhance energy efficiency, but also renewable energy in the city. So this is one of the models that we kind of came up with. It's a model, so there are pros and cons to all the things, and it's only as good as the data you put in it. So the city, as part of this process, benchmarked all of our energy usage using Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is kind of the industry standard. It puts in every single electricity meter and natural gas meter that the city has into a program. Thankfully, it auto connects with Excel and auto populates the data, so there is not any hand keying of like usage data in my part once that's set up. And then I can pull all that data, get the usage for the city. This also takes into account the energy mix that Xcel Energy is using. So how much renewable energy is in that, what their carbon percentage is, et cetera. That's factored into an emissions factor in this model. So the kind of blue line that's going up and down, that is our carbon emissions from city buildings and city activities like street lights, the overhead lights, all of those things are all in there. And the gray line that's kind of stepping it down, that's assuming a linear decrease every year from our initial 2017, which was where the goals were based off of, to our 2030 goal, our 2040 goal, then 2050 being down there. So I have through 2024 on this graph. I just today actually compiled the 2025 data. I just don't have the emissions factor update yet. So we had some increases in use, but it also had some development and like increased meters and things like that. So that also plays into this as well. But it's just kind of a tool to see where we're at. Just like with water, this is a collaborative effort as well. Working with Xcel through this program was super beneficial. And obviously they have a lot of goals as well for being carbon free. And because they are our utility provider, if they make their goals, we will make our goals. But we want to also be working on, primarily right now, working on energy efficiency first before we dive into renewables, really wanting to get our systems to be super efficient first, and then being able to right size renewable energy for the load that we have. And that's a good tip, even just for residential use and all that stuff. Tackling energy efficiency should be your first step. Yes.
Just looking at this graph, it's very visual and very clear.
Yes.
It'd be cool, and maybe Excel would pay for it, have something like by Santa Park or somewhere where all the public could see how we're doing. You know how like when you have donations and they show
Like thermometer things, yeah.
So it'd be cool if we all could see that as we
Yeah.
drive up and have a great big graphic that would show how well we're doing.
Yeah, yeah, so this is also on our city website, but it's not quite as visible as, you know, a thing, but yes. So yes, we're making our way there, and we'll continue to work on that as we move forward and as funding allows. So a lot of these projects are grant funded, so it's, I don't want to say the luck of the draw, it's maybe a little bit, I hope that it's better than the luck of the draw for the amount of work there, but they are a huge time commitment for staff, both in writing grants and managing the grants, and administration of grants is actually typically more work than the actual project itself, especially depending on the funding source and all of that. So, and you have to have matching funds. So I mean, you have to be able to budget and have that set aside too. So there's lots of competing priorities and only a certain amount of money we have. So we'll continue to do our best and see what we can do to accomplish our goals. One of those grant projects happened a couple years ago at City Hall for the HVAC updates. City Hall was built in 1960, and the city bought it from the county in 2020 or 2021, one of the two. And so we used to be a tenant on the third floor. Now we own the building and are the landlord on the first floor. The HVAC system was very outdated. There are very different places in the city building that you couldn't cool or you couldn't warm, and it wasn't very comfortable. And then you could not remotely control the system, which was two things that make that really difficult. One, when you're troubleshooting something, it's really nice to have your vendor be able to sit at their office and look at all of the things that are happening versus having to pay for them to come and look, try to diagnose it, and then figure out what they need, which might then include going back, and just the timing of that gets a little hairy. And for the building manager who gets the alarms in the middle of the night would then have to actually physically get up and drive to City Hall in the middle of the night to check on an alarm versus being able to look on like an iPad or something like that first and see if it's something that really needs your immediate attention or can be fixed in our portal. So we did a whole lot of things. I wrote a grant for this. I still probably can't tell you exactly what we did or I needed to speak. I mean, I know the words, but I don't really know the HVAC world very well. We put in variable frequency drives and economizers, so things that like, instead of a pump running all the time, it only runs a certain amount of the time till it gets to a set point and has some ramping up. Also has the ability now to control remotely and by like timing like the opening and closing of valves. So like we can, on a nice day like today, let the nice air in and warm the building up versus, you know, having heat. Or alternatively, in the other season when it's warm and it's cool at night, we can open, you can sense like, oh, it's nice and cool, let's open that in, let more cold air come in to try to help kind of do that natural heating cycle as well. So this is a grant that we got from the Public Service Commission in Wisconsin. And then total project cost was like $222,000 roughly. It was a $141,000 grant. And we estimate an annual cost savings of like $4,765. It's been probably in practice a little bit more than that. And certainly in the like comfort of working in the building has made some of those intangible things. I spent a summer where my office was 62 degrees and I wore more clothes to work than I did in the middle of winter. My office is now comfortably like 71 degrees in the summer. So like some of those things are very intangible benefits that are not, you know, going to show in a spreadsheet, but it helps with tenants and being able to retain that as well. LED streetlight conversions. If you've driven around town at night in the last couple of years, we have worked to do not only the downtown decorative bulbs to LEDs, but the tall overhead lights as well. This is a grant we got from the Wisconsin DOT, which is called a carbon reduction grant, which was part of the bill, so the bipartisan infrastructure law. Between the grant and the focus on energy rebates, we actually expended $0 in cash to do this project. And we're estimating to save about $25,000 a year in lighting costs. So this was a a no-brainer to do, and at the end of the day, you have no cash expended. A lot of labor hours for our poor electrician in the bucket. He was up and down a lot of times for a couple of months to get that done. So now kind of things that you can do to help for water quality, the environment, sustainability, all the things. Cleaning up after pets is a big one. Pet waste is gross. It's got bacteria, viruses, parasites, all the things. And when it rains, that makes a really gross soup that goes down those storm drains and into our lakes. Helps promote algal blooms and different nutrient loadings and all of that. Don't toss your pet waste down the storm drain. Put it in the trash or flush it down the toilet. If you are on like the walking trails, there are a fair number of kind of green things that have like little doggy bags and have a little trash there that we empty for you. So we're trying to make it convenient for everyone to pick up after their pets. Reducing salt use, we had talked about the chloride study that we were doing earlier. Ways that you can reduce salt use. The best way is to mechanically get rid of your snow. So shovel your snow, snow blow, get out there early. Don't let it, accumulate and all of that. If you do use salt, you want to make sure that there's 3 inches between salt grains, which is like this much. So like you need a lot of space between salt. Anything more than that, it is actually not more effective. You're just literally wasting your money and polluting our waterways.
Does it help if you use pet-friendly salt?
It's still salt. Salt is salt.
It still gets it,
Mhm.
adds to the chloride.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So it's still a chloride-based product. It's just less, toxic or less irritating to pets' feet. So a coffee mug of salt, if you live in town, is enough to do your entire driveway or 10 sidewalk squares. So if you're thinking of that while you're doing that, but obviously, like you said, getting rid of that snow first without any salt is your best bet. Salt only works when pavement is 15 degrees or warmer, which as a resident, it's hard to necessarily know pavement temperatures. So I usually just say like 15 degrees, like air temperature. If it's getting cold, it's not going to work. So then you want to switch to sand for traction if you have ice. But once again, that mechanical removal is your best bet for that.
So is there any, for like commercial people clearing, is there any ordinance or is it's just the way it is?
Yeah, there's
I know when
no,
it comes on our sidewalk, it's
yeah,
pumped.
yes. No technical ordinances. Aside from that, we require that you clear your sidewalk of snow within 24 hours of the end of snowfall. But yes, there are a lot of, especially commercial entities and larger corporate commercial gas stations, home improvement stores that have basically white parking lots. So that's one of the challenges, and even Ranger Rivers has talked about how we've had some trainings that are aimed at like private contractors who do this work and not is getting as much traction there. There was some legislation that was introduced a couple of years ago that would have given some liability protections to private contractors who went through like smart salting courses and all of that in an attempt to do that, but that didn't make it all the way through into law. So that would be a really great way to incentivize using less salt.
But it's also like you have liability if someone slips on your sidewalk. So
Yes, but it also goes back to and I know it's a perception is reality, and people seeing a whole bunch of salt makes them feel good that the sidewalk is clear, but it really isn't any more effective putting it any more than the 3 grains. So that's the hard part. If you really want to be diligent, like once the ice is melted and there's still a salt out there, like go sweep it up and like save it for your next storm. That works as well, but not everyone's going to be doing that, especially in like larger parking lots. In the fall, raking and composting leaves is a big way you can help support water quality. Like I said, they're a significant source of phosphorus pollution. You can rake them, you can compost them in your backyard, you can throw them in your garden, you can bring them to the city and we will compost them for you. You can mulch mow them, that helps get them broke up a little bit, it helps them break down in your garden a little bit better, or even just mulch them and leave them in your yard. And like I said, we collect yard waste, curbside, spring and fall. And we're actually doing that right now. So if you live in the city on Monday and a week from Monday, we will be collecting them curbside. I know it's not the nicest weekend to rake your lawn, but you won't be sweaty when you do it this weekend. So there's a bonus. Planting native plants in your yard is a really great way to support pollinators. It also helps with that stormwater infiltration. So this is less water that will even make it to our lakes and rivers. Helps sequester carbon. They're very pretty. And once it's established, it's a little bit lower maintenance. I don't want to say it's no maintenance because there's still maintenance, but it is lower maintenance. And you will get lots of lovely butterflies and birds and critters and all of that. So this is one of my native plant gardens at home from a couple of years ago when it was a little less wild than it is right now. Planting trees, so this is also kind of a timely topic as a lot of you probably have ash trees in your yard that have either been taken down or will need to be taken down. The Urban Forestry Board had created 2 different lists of recommended trees for the city, one for boulevards and then one for like in your yards that you have a little bit more space. You're kind of back from road salt pollution, some of the more tougher things. You might have some better soils than you would in your boulevard, etc. We have a boulevard tree planting policy, so if you really want a boulevard tree and the city hasn't gotten to planting one there's a form to request and say, hey, I want to plant one, and then there's some rules around it and we kind of work with you to get that taken care of. And we have a lot of tree planting care tips, resources on where to purchase trees in the area. All of that are all on our website, so it's a really great resource as well as you're looking to add trees back to your yard.
Are those mostly native?
So there's a variety of natives. I would say there's more natives on the yard tree planting list than there are on the boulevard. And this is just a small snip of, it's a kind of a full sheet with different trees, and it had some information on like height and width averages, if it's a slow grower, a fast grower, etc. And then it has origin in there, so if it says US, it's a native to the US. And then it has like some like little remarks about it, like if it's got a certain fall color, or if it's some of them have like catkins or things that are going to be kind of messy. So if that bothers you, you probably don't want to plant that kind of tree. Yeah, so that's a great resource for that. Those are not the only trees that work in the city. These are just ones that we know will work well, and they're ones. Especially in the boulevard trees, they are all trees that we have planted and we know have survived in the boulevard. So recycling, so it is the law in Wisconsin to recycle. For curbside recycling, these are the things you want to be bringing. So your aluminum and steel cans, you want to empty them, rinse, labels can stay on. Don't smush them. It's very counterintuitive to most people who have like the garage like crusher. So in a recycling sorting facility, after your curbside bin gets picked up, or if you're at the solid waste site, after our big bin gets picked up, it goes to a facility where it sorts it out into its different components. And part of that process is the first kind of check is it a 2D thing or is it a 3D thing? So 2D things are like paper and cardboard. Those go to one line and they have a whole different set of machinery that helps sort that out. And then it looks, oh, this is a 3D thing. So your bottles and jugs and cans, then it takes it to a whole different thing. If you smush your can flat, the machine has a really hard time realizing that is supposed to be a 3D object, and it'll often end up with paper and cardboard. So like your steel cans, like your lids, or I put like my twist off beer bottle tops in there, you can give it a little squeeze to like, close it at the top, but don't like smush it flat or, squeeze it all the way flat. Same thing with like your plastic jugs, like your milk jugs or your water bottles, etc. Keep them in the shape that they're in.
Should you leave
bottle caps on things?
Yes, so that's a great question. So for plastic things, yes. Caps go back on after you rinse them. For glass, bottles and jugs, because those lids are typically metal, so it's a different material, those you would take off and either, I save them in a soup can and then do that, or you can toss them in the garbage. So glass bottles and jars, it doesn't matter what color it is, all the colors are recyclable. They can be empty, rinse them, remove the lid. Labels are okay, that's fine. They get burned off in the process. For plastics, it's number 1s, number 2s, number 5s, with the exception of like your deli containers, berry containers. They're made of a slightly different process that makes them a contaminant in like our regular recycling stream. For paper, pretty much any paper, you know, your magazines, your newspaper, office paper, Post-it notes. The only things we wouldn't want are things that are like excessively glittery or excessively full of glue. So if it's like a craft project that's got glue all over your paper, that's probably trash. Other than that, we'll take most papers. And then cardboard and paperboard. So that's not only just like your cardboard boxes that you get from like Amazon or other delivery services, but also your paperboard, so like your cereal boxes, crackers, noodles, that kind of stuff. Also the cardboard that's inside of your paper towels and your toilet paper. Those are both considered cardboard and can get recycled.
The number 1 plastics, I noticed that there's a lot of clamshell type things that have a number 1 on them with a PETE.
Yep.
Are those recyclable? No,
No.
I didn't think
Nope.
so, but they
Not
have
in
a
our
1
system.
on them.
I know. So they're made, not to get super nerdy, but I will get super nerdy because that's how I roll. So when a plastic water bottle is manufactured, it's what's called a blow mold. So they have like this chunk of hot liquid plastic. They blow air into a mold, and then that like forms the bottle. And for the like clamshell containers and like deli containers, they have the mold and they basically just pour it in. So it has some extra additives in it to make that shape versus being blowed into the shape. So it melts at a slightly different temperature. So when recycling is all like being reprocessed, they're melting it. So then you have like chunks of the clam shells in there because they don't melt they melt at a higher temperature than like your water bottle. So then you have chunks and then it doesn't work well, and then you have to, you know, throw out that part, or you know, you have more rejects on your bottle line.
But all those water bottles that come in those big, huge 24 things with the plastic,
Yes.
those are recyclable.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Not that
the
anybody
metal
should.
caps on the glass bottles,
Mhm.
can you put them in the metal recycling at
You
that
could.
place?
Yeah, you could do as well. I would probably recommend having them in some sort of other metal container, like a soup jar or something like that, just because some of those, you know, like beer bottle caps are so small, they're going to end up falling throughout the process. But yeah, so you could also go in scrap metal as well.
But not the plastic. A lot of glass bottles do have plastic things too. Like
Yes. Yes, so that those would then have to be just thrown in the trash then, because you don't want loose things. So the very first thing that happens in a recycling plant, it goes through what's called the glass screen, because glass is heavy, it's really hard on machinery, so they want to get it out right away. It's a 3-inch by 3-inch screen that basically everything just like goes over. So anything that's like roughly the size of your fist or smaller is going to fall out with the glass and won't make it through the process. So that's why we don't want loose bottle caps.
So that's why you put the cap back on like a water.
Correct, yes. So if it's on the jug, it'll get through the process and all that.
Survive.
It'll survive.
So if it's a steel top that you've taken off, if it isn't still attached, it's a problem.
Correct. Yep.
So
So
we
it won't.
should throw those in the trash or in the metal.
Yes.
At the dump, you could put them in the metal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Or like I will save a soup can or a larger can, and I
I've been very bad.
put them in there, and then I just kind of squeeze the top shut, and then I'll throw that in with my recycling as well, and that will make it get through as well.
What is it? Kind of like
is it standard that if a plastic lid is on a plastic bottle, it doesn't have a number on it, but that it's the same as the bottle?
So that's a great question. So it doesn't have a number on it, and it oftentimes is actually a different plastic. But the way that works is once they, when a company buys a big bale of recycling, so after they goes through the sorting facility, it's baled. So like the really large like hay bales, but it's like bales of cardboard or bales of plastics. The plastic companies take those and depending on what they're looking to do with it, for the most part, they chip it up into very fine, they call it their flakes or like chips if it's smaller. And then they do that and then they throw it into a big vat of water and the different densities of plastics, one will float, one will sink. So then they skim off the top, that's the one set. And then they drain the water and take the stuff off the bottom and that's the other set. So that's how those bottle caps end up in the right spot because oftentimes they are a different.
But they're all recyclable.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So energy efficiency for focus on energy. So this is if you're an Excel Energy customer. I do believe Dun Energy has a similar program. It's just not called Focus on Energy, but everyone in the city has Excel Energy, so that's what I know and what I can promote. They have free packs that you can order once a year, every household. So these are the ones that are currently out there right now. They have a bathroom pack, a family pack, and a kitchen pack. So it's got some light bulbs, different kind of heat tape or window insulation or things that all can help you reduce your energy use, save you some money by not having to buy some light bulbs, etc. Which is a great thing. And then some upcoming events because it's almost Earth Day and everybody has fun events. So we've talked a little bit about yard waste. So this upcoming Monday and the Monday afterwards, they'll be picked up curbside. Has to be in the paper compostable bags. And then there's also brush if you pile brush. And want everything at the curb by 7 a.m. That's about the time they're starting to get out and doing that. It takes pretty much all day to get this picked up. So if it is still out at 2 o'clock, don't worry. If it's still out on Tuesday, then call me and I will send them back out to inevitably pick up a couple of people who we missed. And we don't pick anything up in the alley, so it needs to be out in the main street part of your property. We have the Arbor Day celebration. So Arbor Day is next week on Friday. So Urban Forestry Board is hosting an event at the Menomonie Public Library. We're going to recognize the library for all of their efforts to beautify the city, both through their beautiful new terrace, which hopefully will be nice enough out that we can be on that terrace. They've done some removals of invasive species on the lake bank and in their property as well. And just their kind of education and being the center of our community. So while some speakers on the history and importance of Arbor Day, recognize that we are a tree city and a bird city USA. And then we'll plant a tree on the library property as well to honor them and to honor Arbor Day.
What kind of tree are you planting?
We're going to plant a hackberry, which is a native tree to Wisconsin. It's one that we plant very frequently in the boulevards because it can take just about anything. It's a really hardy tree. And a really pretty tree as well. It has some berries and stuff that kind of persist into winter for birds and all of that as well. And then we have a free electronics collection coming up. This is actually organized by Dunn County, so anyone in the county can come to this. It's on Thursday, May 7th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Dunn County Fairgrounds. So I believe it's a small animal building is the name of the building, but you will be directed by a lot of, you won't miss it. You will be directed that way. There will be a lot of people there. Maybe I suggest bring a book to read while you're waiting in line. But most things with a cord will take. So not big appliances, but small kitchen appliances, any sort of outdoor electronics, power tools, yard, electric blowers, stuff like that. And then your kind of standard electronics, cell phones, computers, TVs, gaming consoles, iPads, things of that nature. They will take all of that for free, and you can clean out parts of your house. And with that, I will take some questions.
Okay, I need to get rid of like a printer and everything.
Yep.
Okay. Can I bring it in its own box or do I have to get rid of I was gonna carry it in its own box.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah.
Okay, I don't have to take it out.
Yep,
Okay.
yeah, and that collection, you just stay in your vehicle, you just pop your trunk for us or unlock the back end of your tailgate and we will schlep all of your electronics out for you. It's a really good workout for the day.
So we got 3 trees from ash trees being taken down, and one of them, I'm quite sure, died almost immediately. Just didn't make it. And it might, I mean, we'll still wait a little bit longer to see because it's a swamp open. I don't know how, or maybe a later tree to bud out. So but we've also since then decided that wasn't a great choice for where it is. Can we replace it with a different tree than we got? If we let them know.
Yeah, so if it's a boulevard
it's
tree,
dead.
yeah, if it's truly dead, let the city know. I would not be shocked if the swamp white is dead. That was one of our like test species. Every once in a while we order a handful of trees that were like,
Yeah, not so good.
let's try that, and we've had several
No,
of them
we
not
got
make
that
it.
Canada red. What is that?
Cherry?
The cherry,
Actual
yeah,
cherry. Well,
yep.
that's beautiful. And
Yeah.
it's tall, and then
That was a new one last year.
linden,
We
yeah,
all
linden. So then
like
my
that
other
one.
question is that we planted this linden tree, and
They did.
they did. I mean, we chose it though. They do. They will let you choose if you talk to them ahead of time. You know, go to them and stuff. But anyway, and it's got a sucker going right next to the truck. I showed it to the guys when they were coming back watering a little bit. And I wanted them to snip it off.
And-
And I want to know if I can.
So we will come back and prune, because also part of that warranty is that we prune it 3 times in 5 years. But we will do that in the winter, when the trees are for sure dormant.
But they didn't do it.
Well, yeah, so we're still, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not
So
critical of that. I'm just saying
I think this next winter will be more pruning focused. We have the last couple of years pushed to get removals down, just because those ash trees, as they're dying, they get really brittle. So they are much more susceptible to be blown over and all that. So we kind of pushed to get that done at the expense of some of the pruning that's happening. But for sure, based on the species that you had trees that were planted last year, those will get pruned probably this upcoming winter, now that those have been in the ground about a year. So the company that we work with that provides the trees, or that we purchase the trees from, also does some pruning trainings and all of that as well. So our staff went to one at the end of February. So now we have a couple more people that know how to prune and what they're looking for. And then that's part of our warranty as well, as we have to prune them and document that we pruned them.
Because I think that sucker's going to outgrow the weed, and I'm just afraid they'll think it is the weed, and it's
Yeah, and if you want,
so
you
close
certainly
to
can.
the- It just came out about an inch and then went straight up, and now it's
getting bigger. Yeah.
both of them are the weed
And that, yeah. If you want, I would recommend just calling down to the street department and talking to our city forester, Derek, and then I can at least get him on his list of like, okay, I need to make sure I get to this one because I know that it's got, an extra branch coming out that might outcompete.
Those trees were so nice that they got from that company.
Yeah, that was the day they were delivered. We knew they would be we figured 5 feet, 6 feet, whatever. When the trailer came, it was a holy cow. There's some that are 12, 15 feet tall, and Derek sent me a message, was like, you gotta go down here and see these. And I was like, holy smokes, you could see them on the road, and I was like, yeah. So they've been really successful. That Canada Select Red Cherry has been a staff favorite and a resident favorite so far. We have a lot of requests for that one.
And it's a little
well.
smaller. They were helping me choose what to put where, and liked the idea of putting that one close to the corner because it would be smaller. And, I don't know exactly now that I started to say it. I'm not sure what the rationale was. Maybe it was I was worried about the flower garden getting overly shaded.
Yeah, that one won't be quite as tall as some of the other, like an oak or a linden or things like that. But yeah.
They were great though. I got really tired of listening to people complain about the crews and
Yeah, they were,
cutting everything down. So
yeah,
they're just doing a great job. And
Yeah.
they're working so hard.
yes, they've done a great job and have had to do a lot of cutting. A couple of winters ago when we didn't have a lot of snow, they were praying for snow because they're like, we can just plow snow instead of cutting trees today. So they're looking forward to when we get back to cutting down maybe like 30 trees a year in the winter. So they are happy to be hopefully wrapping up.
And
That's the big
Derek
push.
was very nice.
Yes. Yeah, he is great. He's super knowledgeable and yeah, he's a good worker.
Megan, a couple of years ago, I called you, and I don't remember what it was about, but we got to talking about plastics. And you mentioned that researchers are working on a way to recycle the plastic of kids' toys, and I think you called it pyrology or something like that?
Pyrolysis.
Pyrolysis. Is there any update on that?
So it's still a thing, and it kind of has always been a thing. It's basically kind of like incineration, but not quite. First, a lot of those plastics that are what I would consider your junkier plastics, or plastics that are multiple types of the same thing. So you've got like a children's toy that's got, like the harder plastic for like the wheels, if it's like a, little ride-on toy. And it's got, different plastics for where they sit or the ornaments or stuff on it. So it's similar to incineration, but it would take plastics instead of just like general trash, and then heats it up really hot, burns it, and then it derives it into like a really low-grade fuel and like heating source that you can use in like manufacturing. It's allowed in state code. There's been changes to the code that allow that as a process. To my knowledge, it's not in Wisconsin yet. It's not wildly cost effective right now. So I think as technology improves, we may see it, but we haven't seen any of that yet. And still in kind of like the whole waste hierarchy of things, it's burning is, not as great as reuse and reduction and all of that, but certainly a tool for at least deriving some sort of benefit out of something versus just throwing it in the landfill to not rot for the next, 100 years.
I could just speak to one of the barriers with that, and that is PVC is very inappropriate for that process. So there's just so much PVC, and you're talking about these mixed plastics. So when there's PVC in there, then you have a problem with trying to make it more cost effective.
And a lot of air emissions rules and things that or standards that make that a difficult process to not only cost effectively have the plant, but also then meet the standards that you need to meet for that.
In the area that I moved from, does a lot of styrofoam recycling. Is there any thought around here just kind of getting that going?
So there's a couple of places in Wisconsin that do it, primarily in places that have large manufacturing operations that use it. So you can buy a densifier, and because styrofoam is basically air. So it's a machine that you put it in and it smushes it down to a point. It makes these small bales and then you sell those. But typically the recyclables are sold by the semi-load is the kind of the going rate of how things are transferred. It takes a really lot of styrofoam to fill, after going to the densifier, to then like fill a semi-load. So one, having the demand for that. The economics of it don't always work out. And then having like the storage facility to store the bales inside before they do that. So I don't know of any like residential options around here. There, I think, are some companies in the kind of general Wisconsin area that are doing it. In some larger counties or communities, in like the Madison area and like Outagamie County, I know has one as well, but they're partnered with some larger industrial users that their stuff kind of is a piggyback on to that company's work. So not yet around here, but it would be great because it's a big thing that we get a lot of, and it's just, it doesn't smush well in our compactors, and it takes up a lot of space in everyone's bins, etc.
Are there many cities in Wisconsin of this size that have the same level of environmental activity going as Menomonie does?
I would say for cities of our size, yes, just because most of them, so like to have like an MS4 permit, for the threshold for that is essentially, for the most part, once you hit 10,000 people, you're permitted in that. There's some other ways that you can get lumped into being an MS4, but that's the most common one is to have 10,000 people in your municipality or in your urban area. So there are some places that got it before their municipality was actually at 10,000. But because they were like a village and a city and a township that all had like, 5,000 or 6,000 people all right connected, they got an MS4 in their urban area because they essentially were a community of that size.
So a lot of it's driven by just the state regulations for how you deal with runoff, how you deal with all sorts of things.
Yes.
The cities of this size have to comply at that level, all of them do.
Yes. At least for the stormwater, that's one of our more highly regulated things. Now, some of the things around like energy efficiency or like the carbon-free goals, that's something our community and our
Just
council
a
made that choice to do that, which is great. I mean, I think that's awesome. There are a lot of communities that have similar goals. A lot of businesses, et cetera, have similar goals. So I think that is an easier one to take on to when there's kind of that synergy between everybody. But I think one of the biggest things is that no one entity, person, community can do this in a silo. Having these collaborations between us and the county and private businesses and nonprofits and all that working together and each using our strengths in the ways that we can is how we make progress and do this work, because it just wouldn't be possible without that. And I think the communities and areas that have those strong partnerships and strong collaborations are the ones that do this work much more successfully versus the communities that don't have those partnerships, or communities that are kind of, I feel like, in that just under 10,000 range, those smaller communities, or like our townships and things like that. Not that they don't want to do this work or they don't care.
They have less resources.
They have way less resources, both of the monetary variety and the staff variety. Like a town clerk is asked to do a bajillion things on a very part-time basis and things like that. And oftentimes they are the ones who are doing the recycling reports and things like that. And these clerks that's never something they've ever had to do before. So I think that's the one nice thing about being a community of our size, and a community that values the environment, has active citizens, has great nonprofits and civic groups that work together and want to make this a better place. And we have a very strong sense of community here. So taking care of that is important and something that we as the city enjoy being a part of and want to make it better for everybody.
What's something that you want to do that you wish you could do? What's a goal that hasn't been talked about?
That hasn't been talked about.
Yeah, what would be a priority if
I mean, in like the different things, like one of the things I really would like to do, and we've had some discussions on it, like very early discussions on, would be like a food waste composting program. So the state did the DNR, when I say the state, DNR, did a waste characterization study. They've done a couple of them. The most recent one was in 2020. It's where they literally divert loads that are going to landfill and pick through every piece of everything that's in that and weigh it, categorize it into about 85 different categories, and then did this report. So they do that at like 9 landfills, and they do it a variety of different waste types, and it's really cool. Sounds really gross. I think it's cool, but I'm weird. So they did that, and the largest thing that we are currently putting into landfills right now is food waste or food scrap. So they kind of, if you add up a couple of the categories, like they had like wasted food. So that's like food that could have been eaten but went bad, or someone just randomly threw it out because they didn't want it, or you left half your spaghetti on your plate and you just threw it away. And then there's like food scraps are like the things that like the rinds of a vegetable or, you know, melons or things like that you aren't actually edible, but are things that are compostable. And then like compostable paper products. So like your napkins or paper towels or things like that could be composted. If you take all of those categories, it was, depending on the like residential versus commercial, it was in the like 30 to 40% of what's going to landfills is something that could be composted, which would be a kind of a double win on, you save money on tipping fees at the landfill because you're not sending as much stuff to the landfill, and all of that stuff, all that's doing there is breaking down and making a lot of methane gas, which then is released, which releases more carbon into our atmosphere, versus if we composted that material, then you not only avoid all of that cost and all of that carbon emission, but then you have a usable product, and it's actually an even better compost than like what we have at the solid waste site, because it has some of that food nutrients. It's not just yard waste in that as well. So that's probably like a somewhat realistic one that like in the next 10 years, I would like to have that.
So is Minneapolis succeeding at that? Because I know they're doing that.
Yeah, so yeah, they're doing a drop-off model, so they have like dumpsters in like parks and things like that, and then are eventually working towards having like curbside
Yeah, but
collection
what
as
about,
well.
like our sons can have little bags in their kitchen and then it goes out.
In their pickup.
Yep,
It goes
so
out with the recyclables and other stuff.
yeah, some of the private haulers in those areas are starting to do composting as well. And then I believe it's Hennepin County and Ramsey County together have a facility that they just put in. So in Minnesota, there are less landfills and more incineration for trash. They're trying to move away from incineration, just for climate goals, carbon goals, et cetera. But they have this energy recovery facility where they're testing and trying to do where you can put your bag of compostable food scraps in. I believe it's with their recycling, but I can't remember if it's recycling or trash. And then it goes through a line, and a robot / like AI mechanical thing is trained to see that and grab that and take it out and off. The benefit of having that, what they call co-collection like that, it's not a third truck that has to come around to pick that up. Because like right now you have a truck that picks up your trash, a truck that picks up your recycling, unless it's a split body truck, but there's a few places that are still using that, but it's not as common. So that's the big benefit of that, is it's not an additional truck on the road, but still having that same benefit.
And it goes with which one?
I think it's recycling, but I'm not
Yeah, I
100%
think
sure.
so too. I think that's.
That's really tough because it'd be a 30 to 40% cut in the environmental fund revenue.
Correct, which
with
is
tipping
also,
fees.
yes, so the downside of that, and one of the political reasons that some of this doesn't happen, even though it would, in theory, is good for the environment, is exactly what Liz said. And then this, every ton of garbage that is tipped at a landfill, there's a set of fees associated with that, and those fees
goes to environmental.
Goes to an environmental fund, and that fund does a lot of great work and funds a lot of programs like the hazardous waste programs for the DNR, and like our clean sweep programs that we have for hazardous waste in this area are funded out of that. A lot of the runoff grants, stormwater grants, conservation related things are funded out of that fund, which varies in how much is put in there based on the amount of trash we put in the landfill. So that's a hard kind of catch-22. There's also a couple landfills that are really getting very sophisticated in their gas collection, and like Dane County collects natural gas, like to like a compressed natural gas product out of their landfill, and like powers their fleet of vehicles with that, and sells some, I believe, to Quick Trip through a pipeline. That is all dependent on continuing to receive trash, especially trash that has food waste and organic material in it to make that. So it's a hard catch-22 on that. So that's a hard.
Could they capture the gas coming out of those pipes at the dog park and do something with the?
I mean, it's possible to do that, but it's not cost effective, and
That was just
that's
a
a
slide down.
it's a small landfill in the whole scope of things.
So, thank
Yes.
you
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
for coming. I hate to
Yes.
cut people's questions off, but we've gone way
Yeah.
to people's time. So
Yes.
thank you, Megan.
Yes.
And we have 2 talks left. So next Wednesday, April 22nd, we have Go Beyond Earth Day, Think Sustainably for Life with Brianna Capra. And then April 23rd, we have Discover How Landmark Conservancy is working to protect habitats. So with Sarah Norman. So perfect. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.